I still can't shake the memory of that night, no matter how hard I try. It's burned into my mind like a brand, vivid and raw. My shift at the gas station was almost over. Just another quiet evening beneath the dim, flickering lights that barely illuminated the cracked pavement outside. It was the kind of night where nothing ever happens. At least, that's what I always thought. Until that girl walked in. She couldn't have been older than 16, her blonde hair framing a tired face. She seemed nervous, her eyes darting anxiously toward the door behind her. She walked quickly over to the payphone outside, tugging impatiently at the twisted metal cord as she dialed a number with trembling fingers. Even through the thick glass of the station window, I could see her shaking. I watched her closely, feeling uneasy but unsure why. Something was off about this whole scene, something I couldn't quite place. It was a gut feeling, heavy and suffocating. Just then, headlights sliced through the shadows, spilling across the lot as an old, rust-covered van rolled slowly into the gas station. The engine groaned like it was protesting every movement. I found myself staring, captivated yet repelled by the way it lingered a little too long near the payphone, engine idling, its driver hidden completely in shadow. The girl's eyes widened. She dropped the receiver, letting it swing freely from its cord as she stepped back. My pulse quickened as her gaze met mine through the window. Pleading, desperate. I felt frozen in place, helplessly watching the fear dance in her eyes. The van's side door slid open violently with a metallic clang that echoed into the silent night, and in an instant, a dark figure lunged forward, gripping her arm. She struggled, screaming, a shrill, haunting cry that stabbed deep into my bones, shattering the quiet of the station. My heart hammered as I fumbled to grab the phone behind the counter, fingers clumsy, adrenaline rushing. But when I looked up again, they were gone, vanished as if they had never been there. The payphone swung emptily in the night breeze, the faint sound of the dial tone ringing eerily through the stillness. My breath hitched, nausea twisting my stomach as dread gripped my chest. It was only then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The security cameras, pointed directly at the payphone, had been unplugged. And that's when I realized I had just witnessed something horrifying, and whoever had taken her knew exactly what they were doing. Part 2, Shadows of Doubt. The police questioned me again and again, each interrogation more intense than the last. I told them everything I saw, the van, the scream, the dark figure dragging the girl away, but no matter how much detail I provided, it felt as if they suspected me of hiding something. They dug through security footage but found nothing. Of course they didn't. Someone had made sure of that. Days blurred into nights, and nights dragged into weeks. Still, the girl was missing, vanished without a trace, and I couldn't escape the relentless guilt that clawed at my conscience. She had stared straight into my eyes, begging silently for help, and I had been frozen, useless, unable to save her. Sleep became elusive, haunted by nightmares of the girl's terrified face pressing against the gas station window, her eyes accusing me as shadows engulfed her. Each dream ended with a chilling whisper, the voice always twisted, menacing, and inhuman. You watched and did nothing. As my sanity frayed at the edges, strange things began happening at the gas station. First, it was little things, the lights flickering violently, pumps turning on by themselves late at night, empty footsteps echoing across the tiled floor when nobody else was around. Then the whispers started. I heard them lurking in corners, lingering in the shadows, mocking me when I was alone. Soft, cold murmurs that danced along my skin, taunting, reminding me of my failure. I dismissed it at first, blaming exhaustion and stress, but then it escalated. Late one night, as I swept the floor, the faint chime of the gas station door rang out, echoing like a bell in an empty chapel. My heart jolted. I looked up quickly. No one was there. Just darkness and silence beyond the threshold. My breath quickened. My knuckles whitened around the broom handle as I stepped hesitantly toward the door. "Hello?" I called out, voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. Only silence answered. Suddenly, a sharp, wet smack erupted from behind me. I spun around, heart slamming against my rib cage, breath caught painfully in my throat. The broom clattered to the ground, forgotten, as I stared at the footprints, a trail of dark, crimson-red footprints leading from the entrance straight toward me, stopping inches from my shaking feet. Blood. Fresh, dripping, vivid blood. Before I could move, before I could even scream, the lights exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging me into absolute darkness. Then, from somewhere deep within the gas station, a low, chilling laugh echoed, rising to a horrifying crescendo. "I've been watching you," the distorted voice whispered inches from my ear. "Now, it's your turn." And in that terrifying instant, I realized the nightmare I'd been living was only just beginning. The police questioned me again and again, each interrogation more intense than the last. I told them everything I saw, the van, the scream, the dark figure dragging the girl away, but no matter how much detail I provided, it felt as if they suspected me of hiding something. They dug through security footage but found nothing. Of course they didn't. Someone had made sure of that. Days blurred into nights, and nights dragged into weeks. Still, the girl was missing, vanished without a trace, and I couldn't escape the relentless guilt that clawed at my conscience. She had stared straight into my eyes, begging silently for help, and I had been frozen, useless, unable to save her. Sleep became elusive, haunted by nightmares of the girl's terrified face pressing against the gas station window, her eyes accusing me as shadows engulfed her. Each dream ended with a chilling whisper, the voice always twisted, menacing, and inhuman. You watched and did nothing. As my sanity frayed at the edges, strange things began happening at the gas station. First, it was little things, the lights flickering violently, pumps turning on by themselves late at night, empty footsteps echoing across the tiled floor when nobody else was around. Then the whispers started. I heard them lurking in corners, lingering in the shadows, mocking me when I was alone. Soft, cold murmurs that danced along my skin, taunting, reminding me of my failure. I dismissed it at first, blaming exhaustion and stress, but then it escalated. Late one night, as I swept the floor, the faint chime of the gas station door rang out, echoing like a bell in an empty chapel. My heart jolted. I looked up quickly. No one was there. Just darkness and silence beyond the threshold. My breath quickened. My knuckles whitened around the broom handle as I stepped hesitantly toward the door. "Hello?" I called out, voice cracking under the weight of uncertainty. Only silence answered. Suddenly, a sharp, wet smack erupted from behind me. I spun around, heart slamming against my rib cage, breath caught painfully in my throat. The broom clattered to the ground, forgotten, as I stared at the footprints, a trail of dark, crimson-red footprints leading from the entrance straight toward me, stopping inches from my shaking feet. Blood. Fresh, dripping, vivid blood. Before I could move, before I could even scream, the lights exploded in a shower of sparks, plunging me into absolute darkness. Then, from somewhere deep within the gas station, a low, chilling laugh echoed, rising to a horrifying crescendo. "I've been watching you," the distorted voice whispered inches from my ear. "Now, it's your turn." And in that terrifying instant, I realized the nightmare I'd been living was only just beginning. The gas station felt different after that night. It wasn't just unsettling, it had become sinister, breathing an aura of malice I couldn't shake. But quitting wasn't an option. The police had warned me to stay put, insisting they might need me for more questioning. They said they had no leads, yet I sensed suspicion hidden beneath their carefully chosen words. Each shift, every shadow, and every sound was torture. My nerves frayed, paranoia eating at the edges of my sanity. The whispers grew louder, closer, murmuring things I couldn't quite understand, taunting my mind until reality blurred dangerously. One stormy night, as rain pounded violently against the windows and lightning streaked across the black sky, someone stepped inside. The bell chimed weakly, barely audible over the howling wind. I squinted through dim lighting, struggling to see clearly. A man stood dripping near the door, water pooling at his muddy boots. He wore a torn, hooded jacket that concealed most of his face, but his presence radiated something cold, something deeply unsettling. He moved slowly toward the counter, each heavy step making my pulse quicken. "I need your help," he rasped, voice rough and low, like gravel scraping on metal. I swallowed hard. "With what?" He leaned closer, and beneath his hood I saw his face, a mask of pale skin, eyes sunken, piercing into me with intensity that twisted my stomach. He smelled like damp earth and decay. "She wants to see you," he whispered, a twisted smile tugging his cracked lips. "She hasn't forgotten how you watched her scream." My heart stopped, my veins freezing with dread. Who are you talking about?" "You know exactly who," he hissed, eyes suddenly wide, unhinged. "Amanda." At the mention of her name, my body went numb, terror squeezing my lungs. Before I could speak, the lights flickered violently again. The man let out a horrible, guttural laugh that shook me to my core. "She's waiting," he said with an eerie calmness, pointing slowly toward the storage room door. "Don't keep her waiting." My throat dry, hands trembling uncontrollably, I stared at the door. I'd always hated that room, the air stale and oppressive, the corners too dark, too deep. When I glanced back, the man was gone. My pulse thundered in my ears. I considered running, leaving everything behind, but something compelled me forward, irresistible yet horrifying. Each shaky step toward the door was like walking toward a nightmare from which I knew I'd never escape. As I grasped the cold metal handle, a chill traveled down my spine, the whisper returning, faint and malicious. "Come closer." And in the split second before the door creaked open, I realized the terrible truth. I wasn't alone, and something much worse than I'd ever imagined waited for me in the darkness. My heart thundered relentlessly as the door swung open with a rusty groan. A rush of frigid air brushed my skin as if something icy and dead had just exhaled into the room. I squinted, desperately searching for any movement, but saw nothing, only blackness, heavy and suffocating. Taking one trembling step forward, I flipped the light switch, praying silently that it would work. The bulbs flickered weakly, casting sickly yellow pools of illumination across old cardboard boxes, dusty shelves, and stacks of forgotten merchandise. Nothing seemed out of place, yet every nerve in my body screamed that something terrible lurked unseen. "Amanda?" I called softly, voice trembling, feeling foolish yet unable to stop myself. "Are you here?" No response. Only silence hung in the air, thick enough to choke on. A sudden crash shattered the stillness, exploding from somewhere deep within the room. I jolted, fear erupting through my veins like a wildfire. Boxes toppled violently from shelves, spilling onto the floor. Something heavy thudded against the wall, and then silence again, more terrifying than ever. I took another shaky breath, moving cautiously toward the noise. My feet shuffled along the dusty floor, pulse pounding in my ears. As I rounded the corner, my eyes widened, stomach heaving at the gruesome sight before me. Scrawled in smeared, dark crimson letters across the wall was a message. "You let him take me." Blood dripped from every letter, forming small crimson pools on the concrete floor. The air became colder, bitter, and metallic. Dizziness threatened to overtake me, panic swelling in my chest. Something brushed against my shoulder, ice cold and wet. I spun around sharply, stumbling backward into a shelf, heart lurching violently. Standing mere inches away was Amanda, her pale face illuminated eerily beneath flickering lights. She looked exactly as she had that night, frozen in fear, her blonde hair damp and matted. But her eyes were hollow, lifeless, black voids filled with agony and rage. "You watched," she whispered, lips barely moving. Her voice echoed, broken and twisted, filled with hatred. "You did nothing. Now you'll feel what I felt." Before I could scream, her fragile form lunged at me, fingers clawing at my throat. I fell back, hitting the ground hard as she vanished abruptly, leaving me gasping, choking for air. My vision blurred, head spinning violently. As I lay shaking on the storage room floor, the lights suddenly returned to normal. The bloody message had vanished, replaced by blank walls, empty shelves, and silence once again. Had it all been real, or was I losing my grip on reality? Just as I stumbled to my feet, desperate to flee, my eyes caught sight of something wedged beneath the shelf. With trembling fingers, I reached out and pulled free a faded photograph, stained with dried blood. My breath stopped. It was Amanda, her terrified face staring directly into the camera, mouth open in a silent scream. Behind her, barely visible, was a shadowy figure, tall and twisted, smiling grotesquely from the darkness. The horrifying realization hit me like a bullet. Whoever had taken Amanda 10 years ago was still out there, and they knew exactly who I was. Sleep became impossible. The image of Amanda's silent scream haunted me relentlessly, burned into my memory. Her empty eyes followed me everywhere, accusing me of failing her that night. But more terrifying was that shadowy figure behind her, the man who had escaped justice, the monster who now knew my face. I started digging, desperate for answers. The gas station's history was darker than I'd ever imagined. Amanda wasn't the first to vanish here. Dozens of girls had disappeared nearby over the past 20 years, each taken without a trace. The pattern was chillingly consistent, and each time someone like me, a helpless witness, had been left behind. The deeper I dug, the stranger things became. People spoke in hushed whispers about an employee who'd worked here years ago, someone quiet, someone nobody ever suspected, someone who suddenly disappeared one night without explanation. Rumors claimed he'd never really left, lingering in the shadows, waiting patiently to strike again. Then one evening, just after midnight, I heard a familiar, sickeningly slow creak of the gas station's door. I froze, heart skipping painfully. Standing just inside, silhouetted by harsh fluorescent light, was a tall figure, face hidden beneath the hood of a familiar torn jacket. It was him, the man from the storm, Amanda's messenger. He slowly removed his hood, revealing a face scarred and distorted, eyes sunken into dark sockets. A wicked grin spread across his cracked lips. "You've been looking for me," he rasped softly. "I've noticed." My pulse hammered. "Who are you?" He stepped closer, eyes glinting coldly. "I'm someone who knows what happens when people watch, but don't act." He leaned over the counter, breath foul, voice barely above a whisper. "But you're special. Amanda wanted me to find you." My blood ran cold. "Why? What do you want from me?" His smile widened grotesquely, exposing rotted teeth. "She wants you to understand her suffering, her helplessness. She wants me to take you where I took her." Fear surged, adrenaline spiking. My hands trembled beneath the counter, fingers brushing against something metal. Scissors. My mind raced. This was my chance. He reached toward me, hands filthy, nails jagged and stained with dried blood. "Come quietly," he sneered, "and I might be gentle." Instinct took over. I lunged forward, plunging the scissors deep into his forearm. He screamed, a guttural howl of pain and rage, as I bolted toward the exit. Bursting outside, I gasped sharply in the cool night air. My relief shattered instantly, however, when I saw what awaited me. The gas station lights flickered wildly, revealing figures standing motionless around the edge of the lot. Dozens of them, their pale faces illuminated like phantoms in the darkness. Amanda stood among them, her lifeless eyes fixed upon me. "No," I whispered, backing away. "This can't be real." They advanced slowly, faces twisted in anguish, their collective whispers rising to a terrifying chorus. "You watched us all. You did nothing." Behind me, the door slammed open violently. The man stumbled forward, eyes blazing with hatred, clutching his bleeding arm. "You can't run from them," he growled. "You can't run from me." Surrounded, heart thundering, I had nowhere left to turn. The whispers became a deafening chant, drowning me in terror. Their pale, ghostly hands reached toward me, grasping, clawing. And suddenly, as the circle closed tighter around me, I realized the awful truth. This wasn't just vengeance. It was punishment. And Amanda wasn't done with me yet. I stood frozen, heart pounding, breath shallow as the ghostly figures closed in around me. Amanda stood nearest, her pale hand extended, eyes sorrowful and pleading. The man behind me laughed bitterly, relishing my fear, believing his twisted revenge had finally come full circle. But suddenly, Amanda stopped. She turned slowly toward the man, her expression changing from anguish to fierce determination. "No," she whispered softly. Her voice echoed, strong and steady, commanding attention. It was never her fault. The man's twisted smile faltered, confusion flickering across his distorted features. "What?" Amanda's eyes locked onto mine, filled with an emotion I hadn't expected. Compassion. "You weren't the one who hurt us," she said firmly. "You were as powerless as we were. You've suffered enough." As her words filled the air, the other ghostly figures halted. Their eyes shifted from accusation to understanding. I could feel the weight lifting, my burden of guilt slowly dissolving. "No!" the man shouted angrily, desperation tainting his voice. "She watched you suffer. She did nothing." Amanda stepped closer to him, her presence radiant and powerful. "You were the monster," she told him, voice unwavering. "You chose cruelty. She deserves freedom, just like we did." With those words, Amanda reached out and touched his shoulder gently. The man screamed, a sound so painful and anguished it tore through the night. His form began to fade, cracking like fragile porcelain until he shattered into dust and vanished completely, leaving behind only silence. The figures surrounding me slowly faded too, their faces peaceful now, smiling softly as they finally found rest. Amanda lingered a moment longer, stepping closer until we stood face to face. "Thank you," she whispered, "for remembering me." "I'll never forget," I vowed softly, tears stinging my eyes. "I promise." She smiled gently, a warm glow surrounding her, then slowly disappeared into the night air. I stood alone now, gasping softly, feeling light and free for the first time since that terrible night. Rain began falling gently, washing away the lingering shadows as the sky cleared, stars appearing brightly above. Sirens filled the distance, lights flashing as police cars approached quickly. As officers rushed toward me, something caught my attention on the ground. A small, worn pendant lay at my feet. Amanda's necklace, the one she wore that night, a reminder that she had finally found peace. As an officer wrapped a comforting blanket around my shoulders, I looked up at the clear night sky, breathing deeply, feeling a sense of peace I never thought possible. Amanda's message was clear. Redemption was possible, even in the darkest moments. And tonight I had finally been set free.